I think we have to separate out sort of the deep structural story from the short-term narrative that is affecting how we see these issues. The deep structural reality is that China has been becoming wealthier, more sophisticated, more able, based on its own indigenous capabilities, to do higher tech things for 40 years. And its interests outside its own borders have been expanding as well. For the first time in 3,000 years, China is dependent on fossil fuels coming from the other end of the planet, from unstable places through potentially unstable waters. This was never a Chinese problem until about 15 years ago in its history. There's no precedent for China having to worry about things so far from home. So this is new, and it naturally brings about these questions of geopolitical overlap of interests and potential conflict. On top of that, we have the multi-decade question of whether China's system was becoming, economic system, was slowly but consistently evolving to be more like the systems we use in the advanced economies out here. It was pretty safe to say when Zhu undertook the negotiations necessary to get China into the WTO and make the commitments that China made to enter the WTO, that he imagined a future China that had a much smaller role, for example, for state enterprises, a much smaller role for the Communist Party of China in guiding and deciding how outcomes were going to occur in industry after industry after industry, compared to what Xi Jinping is saying today. So these are the really long-standing arc of history questions which we have to grapple with and wrestle with. And as we discussed before, there has been some change of the debate in Beijing about what's the best model to look after China's long-term economic welfare and what kind of political evolution China would need in order to have a more OECD-like economic system. It turns out very hard to have our economy with their politics. No one's ever done it. China has done so much that surprised us in past decades that we kind of gave it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe China could have an authoritarian politics and a more or less liberal economics. That is not looking very likely to most people right now. And on top of that, even in just the past few months, many Chinese on the economic side have started explicitly saying China's model is different than the Western model. They had previously always, whenever anybody said Beijing consensus, Beijing model, everyone on the Chinese side pointed out, that's Josh Ramo. That's not anybody in China saying that China has a model, an alternative economic model. Now they are saying that they do. And that has, in turn, made it more difficult for traditional engagers, liberals in the US and Europe to say, hey, we're convergent. We're going to get to the same place. We just have to manage patience, maybe deal with the symptoms of trade problems for the time being, but we don't have to really contemplate blowing up the system as we know it. And now all of that's open for debate and discussion.